Hello everyone, thanks for dropping by. I've got to be out in a bit, so it'll be just a quick video this week. As you know, feminism is part of the landscape right across America and Canada, and has been so for several decades. But there's a new movement rolling around in America which is causing the feminist crowd and some parts of corporate America worries. Namely, this. As you can see, it's a site called Recon, and as you can read, what you need to know about the rise of anti-feminists in the US. This was done on 18th of January this year by a woman, naturally, Annabelle Rocha, and Recon isn't a man-friendly site, as you can see. This, and no doubt this, that they support. It's a sort of hit piece against guys, they call them anti-feminists, and it's a sort of what would you say, anti-MGTOW, but it doesn't mention MGTOW at all. Anyway, it says a necessary read for girls, homosexuals, and theys of our allies as we navigate a rapidly changing cultural fraught, complicated country where our bodies are constantly being legislated. Sign up for Honey today. That's just the advert. When reproductive rights at the forefront past and coming election, voters show concerns for reproductive and women's rights, but according to a new consumer report by Foresight Factory, anti-feminism is on the rise in the US. We are seeing it move beyond social media in discourse to the agency of American politics. Then it goes down. The concept of feminism has a branding problem in America. In particular, the term of feminism just doesn't speak to people in the way that it should, and has become loaded with and polarized, says Margot Peppers, Foresight Factory Consumer Trends Editor, wherever that is. And who are most likely self-identified as feminists. I consider myself a feminism, and the two groups who most strongly identified as feminists were women aged 16 to 34, no surprises there, and women 55 and older, in other words, post-war cat ladies, who are also postmenopausal. Women aged 16 to 34, you've seen them on the various clips on YouTube. A guy asks what they think of men, and a lot of them say men are trash and they're useless, etc. So they've been indoctrinated with the feminist ideology. And then, given the media popularizing by millennials and Gen Z, it makes sense. As you can see, this site is a man-hating site. It goes against the idea of men being men. Feminist, a person who believes in social, economic and political equity of the sexes. Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, hope I got that right, said at her TED Exclusion talk, we should all be feminist, a definition famously sampled by Beyonce's track Flawless. Never heard of it. The pink feminist text has become iconic imagery of Bayhive and beyond. And now says it in 2023 was dubbed the Year of the Girl by several outlets, including NPR and Days, from the success of the Barbie movie, and to TikTok. But there's lots of TikToks of women complaining guys are not bothering with them. The conversations about girl dinner, girlhood, trending, and arguably continue the latest trend is influences donning bows in their hair. So if you're over in America and you see a woman with a bow in her hair, it means that she's a feminist, and no doubt that goes with a ring in her nose or a bull ring in the gap between her nose. And of course, if she's got unnatural coloured hair and an armful of tattoos, at least you know what to look out for, guys, to avoid them. And then it goes beyond celebrating their feminist identity. The technology at the fingertips of younger generations has allowed them to share information, shift conversations, and mobilize for equally issues in ways we haven't seen before. Also to complain that guys are not wanting to date them. And then it goes down again. More Gen Z and millennials are kind of the most values-focused consumers. They're the ones who are the forefront of Me Too movement, and in many ways saw these efforts really pay off, with figures of authority like Harvey Weinstein being held to account. Well, in that case, I agree with them. He should have been held to account. And then it goes down decades before. Shifts of cultural narrative have also influenced how older generations view feminism. Then we have women in age 55 plus who are in their 20s when the third wave of feminism came about, so they see feminism as a sort of core part of their identity. In other words, they were indoctrinated with the feminist mind virus, and they were also riding the cock carousel while they waited for Chad to come and marry them. She said baby boomers are also least likely generation to believe that feminism was negative to society, with only 16% believing so. And then women between the ages of 35 and 54 are not necessarily anti-feminists, but more neutral on the topic. But you see more women aged 35 to 54 complaining on TikTok that they can't get guys to date them or commit if they do date them. Now that's the feminist side. Now we go to the anti-male side. 64% of anti-feminists are male, 26% between the ages of 16 and 34, which, you notice, are women identify as feminists are women aged 16 to 34. And it comes the hit piece. A study published in July focused on the incel community. They always brand us as incels, the group of sexually or romantically frustrated men who blame women and society for their inability to form relationships. That's the hit piece on guys. No mention of MGTOW at all. Guys who simply decided the best course of action is to look after themselves. As Recon reported in November, one of the key elements of incel identity is anti-feminism. Though this overlap exists, Peppers say it is important to note that the two are not synonymous. And then there's a much more extreme group. As you know, it is a subculture that seems to give young men a sense of identity and belonging in a world where they're not really finding that elsewhere, Peppers told Recon. Now that could be code, but the subculture is MGTOW. They seem to think we're a separate extremist group to incels. In other words, as I said at the beginning of the video, this is another hit piece against men. And then it says, so that leads young men towards anti-feminism. Pepper says feelings of disenfranchisement. And then it goes on about women's rights, and then this male identity crisis and the widespread loneliness and social disconnection attributed to technology. That's women on TikTok and sharing on various social groups leads some men to seek belonging and affirm feelings of disenfranchisement in online spaces like Reddit forums. That could be another a poke towards MGTOW, even though the MGTOW channels on Reddit have been discontinued, i.e. censored. And then it goes on about In November, the University of Rhode Island assistant professor and former Harvard professor post-document Miriam, another woman, Linda, spoke with Retcon about the misconception between what women look for in male partners and what men feel like they have to be. The women look for in male partners the shopping list. We've all seen that on the YouTube videos about MGTOW. And then it goes more yada yada. Prepper said American men feel social pressure that they don't want, but this messaging, amplified by marketing and social media, leaves brands with a responsibility to reduce the polarization by working towards debunking stereotypes and supporting men who feel ostracized. In other words, corporate America looking at the sales figures. They don't want men turning against their products and not buying them. And then it goes on, the old whipping boy, Andrew Tate, the celebrity misogynist. Before his account was deleted, Tate had 4.5 million Instagram followers, 600,000 YouTube subscribers, and 14 billion views on his TikTok hashtag. Also, Andrew Tate lives rent-free in all their heads. The women's heads, that is. And then he normalized misogyny, yada yada yada. And more about him. And then we come back to present-day America. White House Speaker Mike Johnson blames the country's issues on the sexual revolution and radicalized feminism, or presidents like Trump's, which appealed to identity rather than political issues. Trump had some quite good political issues. It exemplifies the dangers in allowing anti-feminism to run rampant. Well, feminism has run rampant for over 50 years in America, so they shouldn't be surprised when there's a backlash. But they never mention MGTOW, which is more than incels, and MGTOW is having more an effect on the American economy and on society than incels or feminism has. Now that's a site called Retcon. The only other thing I found in anti-feminism as such was this Forbes magazine or website. This was done on June 5th this year by another woman, Korean Post. It says how corporate leaders can counter young men's rising anti-feminism. It says young men are becoming silly boy. Young men are becoming increasingly anti-feminist, according to new research. In the US, 45% of men aged 18 to 29 say they face discrimination, according to a Brookings Institute poll. This trend is similar in Europe and over here in Britain, where young men express growing resistance to gender diversity initiatives. Also in the workplace, in offices, they becoming quite toxic if there's more women in them than men, and guys have to be careful, otherwise they become out of a job. That's why some companies are finding it's more beneficial for them not to hire women in the first place. It says, given millennial and Gen Z's widening presence in the workforce, well, they are the new generation, young people, these rapidly changing attitudes threaten firms' diversity gains. Leaders intent on fostering gender equality can help counter the anti-feminist trend. Well, a lot of companies are not simply hiring women because they found that hiring women in offices tend to be counterproductive. And it says millennials and Gen Z are not just turning against feminism, they also feel pressure from previous generations to prove their masculinity. I don't know where they get that from. Often through physical displays and sexualized talk about women. A Pew survey found these young men think that stay-at-home dads are lesser men, in contrast to older generations, and Ipsos and King's College study shows. Well, some cases they are right. I know of one guy, he became a stay-at-home dad when I worked at Amazon in my first year or so there. He quit his job. His wife was a high earner, so he stayed at home to raise their, I think they had 3 children. But anyway, that's beside the point. It says one reason this shift may be greater, it may be that gender equity efforts have focused on women's access to education, work and promotional opportunities, leaving some men resentful as traditional male-dominated jobs have become more competitive. But you don't see women going into the male-dominated jobs where you got to get your hands dirty, though. Oil rig, construction, mining, on a platform in the middle of the ocean, all the technical skills like car maintenance, car building, aircraft building, ship building, most of them, the workforce is all still male. Political movements that capitalise on this resentment by promoting anti-feminism, I've not heard of any political movement that capitalises on that. Anti-homosexual messages, that comes from the government. The pandering to less than 1% of the population and endorsing masculinity. I've never heard of that. Could be exacerbating this trend. Some also blame the shift on the commodification of anti-male sentiments. And then significant liability for anti-feminism. Millennials and Gen Z men growing rejection of gender diversity initiatives could be costly for employers and their female colleagues. Well, as I said before, companies are starting to no longer hire women because they find that it's just a case of hiring trouble into the workforce and production goes down, so they're just not even bothering to employ them. But anyway, it goes, when men feel they have limited power, they rate female job applicants as less desirable candidates and recommended lower pay, according to findings from a set of published experiments. They also become more tolerant of gender and gender identity discrimination and inequalities, as you're seeing in the companies today, not taking a serious look at the gender demographics of their workforce. Workplaces where men compete to demonstrate their masculinity often suffer from toxic cultures, lower safety standards, misconduct, and abusive leadership. They also exhibit negative attitudes and behaviours towards women and alphabets, studies show, which encourages harassment. But from what I've seen on YouTube, it's women that are doing the harassing against guys, because most HR departments are populated by women. There you go, what's that? How polite groups respond to protests. Never mind. And then we got to the strategies for the corporate leaders, what they can do, support alternate modes of masculinity, diffuse men's resentment, assess the corporate culture. Well, they're doing that by not bothering to take on women anyway. And that's the article. But as you can see, there's something of a backlash against the feminists right across America. Whether this is going to be more intense as the election gets closer, your guess is the same as mine. But it's a sort of action-reaction. Anti-feminism isn't a new thing in America, as I found it goes back to the 1920s and 30s. But with the rise of technology and the present political and economic climate, it's understandable how it's coming about. I'll try and find some more on this for next week, but don't really count on it, as it took me a long while just to find these 2 articles. So I think I'm getting on for the half an hour mark now. Post probably 20 minutes or so, so I'll leave it at that. You know the routine, people, like, dislike, etc. It's completely up to you. So until next Monday, that's it for this one. Bye-bye.